The twin suns of Tatooine beat down mercilessly on the dune sea, their heat shimmering off endless waves of sand. Then the sky tore open, not with the flash of a ship dropping from hyperspace, but with a jagged wound in reality itself, purple and crackling with energy that had nothing to do with the Force. The rift screamed with the sound of clashing metal and divine fury, before spitting out a single figure who hit the sand hard, rolling with practiced grace despite the disorienting fall. Xena came up in a fighting crouch, sword already drawn, dark hair whipping in the desert wind. Her leather armor was scorched from whatever battle had thrown her through that closing portal. The chakram at her hip gleamed in the double sunlight, a circular weapon of impossibly durable metal that had never failed to return to her hand. But Gabrielle wasn't here. Her partner, her conscience, her heart gone, left behind in a world Xena could no longer see. The warrior princess rose to her full height, scanning the alien landscape with the tactical precision of someone who'd commanded armies. Sand, rocks, strange formations in the distance, two suns where there should be one. The air tasted wrong, felt wrong. This wasn't her world. She'd traveled to many lands, faced countless enemies, even journeyed to the land of the dead itself. But this was something else entirely. A distant roar drew her attention, mechanical, powerful, nothing like any chariot or siege engine she knew. Xena's jaw set with determination. She'd been in worse situations. She'd clawed her way up from warlord to hero, from monster to legend. Whatever this place was, whoever ruled it, she would survive. She would adapt, and she would find her way back to Gabrielle. The warrior princess began walking toward the sound, each step purposeful. Behind her, the dimensional rift sealed completely, leaving no trace except scorch marks in the sand that the wind would erase within hours. Ahead, the towering spires of Mos Eisley spaceport waited, a wretched hive of scum and villainy about to meet someone far more dangerous than any bounty hunter or smuggler it had ever seen. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Cantina district reeked of alcohol, sweat, and something acidic Xena couldn't identify. She'd found civilization, if you could call it that. The buildings were strange, all durasteel and technology she didn't understand, but the basics remained universal. Armed thugs, criminal deals conducted in shadowy corners, the weak being preyed upon by the strong. She'd seen it 1,000 times in 1,000 ports across her own world. Xena had traded a gold bracelet worthless to her, apparently valuable here for water and information. The short, hooded creature who'd made the deal spoke in broken basic that she somehow understood, as if the universe had granted her that small mercy. Credits, Empire, Rebellion, Hyperspace, Blasters, words that meant nothing and everything. She absorbed it all with the quick intelligence that had kept her alive through decades of warfare. Then she'd seen the execution. In a dusty plaza between cantinas, a Rhodian slave had been chained to a post. His green skin was covered in burns and bruises. Standing before him was a massive figure Xena would later learn the species was called a Hoke, holding some kind of energy weapon. Behind the executioner, a slug-like creature lounged on a repulsor sled, surrounded by guards. The hut was laughing, a sound like wet rocks grinding together. The crowd watched with the casual indifference of people who'd seen too much death. Xena had seen that look before, in the faces of villagers who'd lived under her rule when she'd been a warlord, the look of people who'd forgotten they could fight back. She remembered what Gabrielle would say. "You're not that person anymore, Xena. You're a hero now." The warrior princess moved through the crowd like a hunting cat. Her hand found the chakram at her hip. The Hook raised his blaster toward the Rhodian's head. Xena's arm snapped forward in a motion honed by 10,000 practice throws. The chakram sang through the air with its distinctive ring, moving faster than any eye could track. It struck the blaster with impossible precision, sending the weapon flying from the Hook's hand. The circular blade ricocheted off a durasteel wall, angled perfectly off a hanging sign, and returned to Xena's waiting hand as she strode forward into the open plaza. Every eye turned to her. The Hutt's laughter died. The Hook roared in anger, reaching for a vibroblade at his belt. Xena's expression didn't change the cold, calculating look of a warrior who'd killed hundreds and would kill hundreds more if necessary. "Bad idea," she said simply, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent plaza. The Hook charged. He was massive, easily twice her weight, enhanced with cybernetics that whined as he moved. Fast for his size. In her world, he would have been unstoppable, but Xena had fought titans. She'd battled gods. This was nothing new. She waited until the last possible moment, reading his body language with the precision of decades of experience. As the vibroblade descended, she sidestepped smoothly, her own sword coming up in a rising cut that found the gap between armor plates at his elbow. The cybernetic arm sparked and went limp. Her follow-up strike was to the pressure point at his neck. She didn't know this species' anatomy, but she gambled on universal principles. The Hoke's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed like a felled tree. The Hutt's guards raised their weapons, strange rifles that Xena instinctively recognized as ranged weapons. She dove behind a water trough as bolts of red energy scorched the air where she'd been standing. Blasters. So that's what they did. She filed that information away, mind already calculating trajectories and cover points. Her chakram flew again, this time striking 2 guards in sequence before they could fire. The weapon's mystical properties, a gift from her world that apparently transcended dimensions, allowed it to defy physics in ways that made combat in this strange galaxy almost fair. Almost. Xena rolled from cover, coming up with her sword leading. A Weequay guard thrust a vibro spear at her center mass. She parried with a technique Marcus had taught her centuries ago, redirected the spear's momentum, and drove her elbow into the guard's throat. He went down choking. The remaining guards hesitated. That hesitation was fatal to their employer's plans. Xena pressed forward, her legendary battle cry erupting from her lungs. Alalays. A sound of pure warrior fury that had broken enemy formations across Greece. Here, in this alien plaza, it had the same effect. The guards broke and ran. The Hutt began shouting in a language Xena didn't understand, his bulk shifting on the repulsor sled as he tried to retreat. She let him go. For now, instead, she turned to the Rhodian slave, still chained to the post, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. "You're free," Xena said, examining the chains. Strange technology, but chains were chains. She found the locking mechanism, and lacking the key, simply struck it with precise force. The mechanism shattered. "Go. Disappear. Make a life." The Rhodian scrambled away without a word. The crowd remained silent, watching this strange warrior woman who just humiliated one of Jabba the Hutt's lieutenants. Xena could feel their stares, some grateful, some fearful, some calculating. She'd made enemies today. Powerful ones, probably. But she'd also made a choice. "I'm not that person anymore. I'm a hero now. Thank you, Gabrielle," she whispered to the twin suns overhead. "Even here." Then she heard the distinctive sound of weapons powering up behind her. Multiple weapons. Xena turned slowly to see a dozen beings of various species, all armed, all wearing matching armor, surrounding the plaza. At their head stood a Zabrak with a wicked smile. "That was quite a show, stranger," the Zabrak said. "Unfortunately, you just cost my employer a lot of credits, and Jabba doesn't forget debts. You're coming with us." Xena's hand tightened on her sword hilt. Her chakram felt warm against her hip, ready for another throw. She counted the enemies, assessed their positions, calculated her odds. Not great, but she'd faced worse. The warrior princess smiled that cold smile that had once terrified armies. "You're welcome to try." The Zabrak's grin faded. Somewhere in the back of his mind, some primal survival instinct was screaming at him, but greed and duty overrode it. He raised his blaster. His companions did the same, and Xena moved. The first blaster bolt missed Xena by inches as she rolled behind a stone water basin, her instincts adapting to this new form of combat with frightening speed. Energy weapons meant predictable trajectories. Once fired, she could see the bolts coming, track their paths. Not so different from arrows, just faster and deadlier. She counted the shots, listening to the rhythm of fire, building a mental map of her attackers' positions. The chakram left her hand in a blur. It struck a support beam overhead, ricocheted at an impossible angle, and caught two bounty hunters in the shoulders before they could adjust their aim. They went down screaming. The weapon returned to her palm as she sprang from cover, sword extended. A Rhodian fired wildly. Xena twisted, the bolt passing so close she felt its heat on her cheek. Her sword came down on his blaster rifle, cleaving it in two with a strength born from years of conditioning. Her knee found his midsection, her elbow his jaw. He crumpled. "Fan out! Surround her!" the Zabrak shouted, firing in controlled bursts. He was military trained. Xena recognized discipline when she saw it. That made him dangerous. But she'd fought disciplined armies before. Rome's legions had learned to fear her name. A Trandoshan lunged with a vibro axe, the weapon humming with energy. Xena parried, feeling the jarring impact travel up her arm. Strong, she gave ground deliberately, drawing him away from his companions, letting him think he was winning. His axe came down in an overhead chop that would have split her skull. She sidestepped and struck the pressure point behind his knee. Her knowledge of anatomy was extensive, and reptilian nerve clusters weren't that different from mammalian ones. The Trandoshan's leg buckled. Xena's follow-up strike to his neck put him down hard. 3 attackers rushed her simultaneously from different angles. This was the test. Xena's mind accelerated into that combat trance she'd perfected over decades. Time seemed to slow, every movement crystal clear. She threw her chakram at the leftmost attacker, dove forward under the center attacker's wild swing, and came up inside his guard with a vicious headbutt that shattered his nose. Her sword blocked the third attacker's knife thrust, while her chakram completed its arc, striking the first attacker in the temple before returning to clip the knife wielder's wrist. The Zabrak watched his crew fall with growing disbelief. He'd taken contracts across the Outer Rim, hunted everything from Jedi survivors to escaped slaves. He'd never seen anyone move like this woman. No force powers, no fancy technology, just pure skill and terrifying precision. "What are you?" he breathed, his blaster tracking her, but his hand hesitating. Xena straightened, barely winded, her leather armor scorched in places but her stance unwavering. "Someone you should have left alone." The Zabrak made his decision. He triggered a device on his belt, and suddenly a high-pitched whine filled the air. Xena's enhanced hearing caught it immediately. Some kind of signal. He was calling for backup. "You're good," the Zabrak admitted, backing toward a speeder bike parked at the plaza's edge. "But Jabba's reach extends across this entire sector. There's nowhere you can hide. The bounty on your head just became very profitable." He mounted the speeder. "Welcome to Tatooine, stranger. You just made the worst enemy you could have." The speeder screamed away in a cloud of dust and exhaust. Xena let him go, her tactical mind already working through the implications. She'd wanted to stay unnoticed, to gather information, to find a way home. Instead, she'd drawn attention to herself within hours of arrival. But the alternative had been standing by while an innocent died. That wasn't who she was anymore. That could never be who she was again. The crowd that had fled during the fight began creeping back, curious and cautious. An elderly Twi'lek woman approached, her head-tails trembling slightly. You're either very brave or very foolish, off-worlder. Jabba will send everyone after you now." "Let them come," Xena said simply. Then, seeing the woman's fear, "I didn't mean to cause trouble for anyone else. I'll leave your settlement before—" "No." The voice came from behind her, rough, confident, with an edge of amusement. Xena turned to find a human woman in worn spacer's gear leaning against a cantina entrance. She had the look of someone who'd seen too many planets and made too many compromises to survive. A blaster hung casually at her hip, and her eyes were sharp with intelligence. "You're not going anywhere. Not until we talk." Xena's hand didn't move toward her weapon, but her body language shifted subtly into a ready stance. "I'm not looking for more enemies. Good. Because I'm not offering to be one." The woman pushed off from the wall and walked closer, unafraid. Xena respected that. "Name's Kira Thrace. I run cargo through this miserable dustball when I can get work." "And what you just did?" She gestured at the unconscious bounty hunters scattered across the plaza. "That was the most entertaining thing I've seen in months. Glad I could provide a show." Oh, it was more than a show. Kira stopped a respectful distance away, her posture relaxed but alert. Xena recognized a fellow warrior when she saw one, even in this strange galaxy. That was a professional military assault broken by one woman with a sword and a very interesting throwing weapon, which means you're either suicidal, incredibly skilled, or both. I'm betting on skilled. What do you want? Xena kept her voice neutral, but her instincts were already telling her this woman might be useful. Information. Resources. A way off this desert planet. Same thing everyone in Mos Eisley wants: credits and survival. Not necessarily in that order. Kira's smile was sardonic. But I also have a problem. I was supposed to deliver cargo to a settlement 300 kilometers north, but the local gangs have been hijacking shipments. I need someone who can fight. You, apparently, need to disappear before half of Jabba's organization comes looking for you. I can offer transport off Tatooine once the job's done. Xena considered. She'd worked with smugglers before. Autolycus had been a thief and a scoundrel, but loyal when it counted. This woman had that same mercenary practicality, that same survivor's cunning. What's the cargo? Medical supplies, Bacta tanks, antibiotics, stuff the settlers need for the moisture farming communities. Nothing illegal, nothing that'll attract Imperial attention, just honest work in a dishonest galaxy. Kira met her eyes steadily. I saw what you did for that Rhodian. You're not the type who leaves people to die. Neither am I, which is why I'm still broke. Despite everything, the strangeness of this world, the impossibility of her situation, Xena felt her lips quirk in a small smile. You remind me of someone. Yeah? They as charming as me? More. The word came out softer than Xena intended, grief flickering across her face before she locked it down. Gabrielle. She had to find a way back. Kira caught the expression and had the grace not to comment. Instead, she extended her hand in what Xena was learning was a universal gesture of agreement. So, we have a deal? You help me deliver the cargo, I get you off this rock and away from Jabba's hunters. From there, you can figure out wherever you're trying to go. Xena clasped the offered forearm in the warrior's grip she'd used for decades. Deal. But I work my own way. No one gives me orders. Wouldn't dream of it. Kira's grin widened. My ship's at Docking Bay 47. We leave in 2 hours, gives you time to grab whatever gear you need. Fair warning. Where we're going isn't exactly safe. Raiders, predators, and probably more of Jabba's thugs looking for easy targets. I've faced worse. I believe you. Kira turned to go, then paused. Never got your name, by the way. Xena. Just Xena? The warrior princess thought of all her titles: destroyer of nations, slayer of gods, the warrior princess of Amphipolis. Here, they meant nothing. Here, she could be whoever she chose to be. Just Xena. Works for me. See you in 2 hours. Just Xena. Kira disappeared into the crowded streets, leaving Xena alone in the plaza with unconscious bounty hunters and curious onlookers. The elderly Twi'lek woman approached again, this time with more confidence. You'll need supplies. Food. Water. I have a shop. 2 streets north. Tell them Nyla sent you, they'll give you a fair price. She hesitated. Thank you. For the Rhodian. His name was Tico. He was just trying to buy his family's freedom. Xena nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like an old, familiar cloak. In saving one life, she'd complicated her own situation considerably. But that was the price of being a hero. Gabrielle had taught her that, the hard way, as she moved through the streets of Mos Eisley, gathering supplies and learning the basics of this galactic civilization. Xena's mind was already working on multiple levels. Short term, survive, help Kira, earn passage off this planet. Long term, find someone who understood dimensional travel, magic, whatever had brought her here, find a way home. But there was a third consideration, one that nagged at her warrior's instincts. This galaxy was at war. Empire against rebellion. Tyranny against freedom. She'd seen it before, lived it before, had been on both sides of that equation. If she got involved, if she chose a side, there would be no going back. She'd be committed to another war, in another world, while Gabrielle waited for her return. The smart play was to stay neutral, stay focused, get home. But when had Xena ever made the smart play? She found Nyla's shop and began gathering supplies, her mind already wondering what awaited her in the wastes beyond Mos Eisley. Whatever it was, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else in her violent, complicated life, head on. With steel in her hand and fire in her heart, Kira's ship was a modified YT-1300 light freighter that had seen better decades. Scorch marks from blaster fire scarred its hull, and one of the sensor arrays hung at an angle that suggested hasty repairs. But the engines hummed with a healthy power that Xena's experienced ear recognized. This ship might look like scrap, but someone had invested serious effort into keeping it running. She's called the Broken Promise, Kira said as they climbed the boarding ramp. Bought her off a Corellian smuggler who owed me a favor. Or maybe I owed him. Honestly, after enough drinks, we both forgot. The interior was cramped but functional. Crates of medical supplies were secured in the cargo hold with magnetic clamps. Xena inspected them with the eye of someone who'd organized supply caravans across hostile territory. This is more than enough for a farming settlement. What's the real story? Kira paused at the cockpit entrance, impressed. You're sharper than most muscle I hire. The settlement's been hit by some kind of plague. Tusken raiders poisoned their water supply 3 months ago. Empire won't help because they're ungoverned territory. Rebellion can't help because they're stretched too thin. So people like me fill the gap. For a price. How much? Enough to keep the Promise flying for another month. Maybe 2 if I'm lucky. Kira dropped into the pilot's seat and began the launch sequence. Strap in. Tatooine's atmosphere is hell on repulsor lifts. Xena secured herself in the co-pilot's seat, watching the alien controls with fascination. In her world, the height of technology was catapults and siege towers. Here, people flew between worlds like she once sailed between islands. The scale was staggering. The freighter shuddered as it lifted off, sand swirling beneath them. Through the viewport, Mos Eisley shrank rapidly, becoming just another cluster of buildings in an endless desert. Then they were soaring over the dune sea, twin suns blazing overhead, and Xena felt her stomach lurch with the unnatural sensation of flight without wings. First time in a ship? Kira asked, noting her white-knuckled grip on the armrests. First time flying at all. Xena forced herself to relax, treating it like any other new combat technique. Fear was just information. Discomfort was just sensation. Master it. Don't let it master you. You're from a primitive world then? Backwater colony that never developed space travel? Something like that. Xena wasn't ready to explain dimensional rifts and Greek gods. Not yet. They flew in silence for several minutes, the landscape below shifting from sand to rocky canyons. Kira handled the controls with practiced ease, occasionally adjusting course to avoid what she called Tusken territory. Xena absorbed everything, learning the basics of navigation through observation. If she was trapped in this galaxy, she'd need to understand how to survive it. Incoming, Kira suddenly shouted, jerking the controls hard left. A streaking bolt of energy flashed past the viewport, close enough that Xena saw the cockpit instruments flicker. Below them, 3 speeder bikes had emerged from a canyon, each carrying armed riders. More blaster fire erupted from their weapons, bright red streaks cutting through the air. Raiders, Kira snarled, pushing the Promise into a steep climb. Probably the same ones who've been hitting my shipments. Hold on. The freighter groaned as Kira threw it into evasive maneuvers. Another bolt struck their shields, and Xena saw energy ripple across an invisible barrier. So that's what the shimmering effect was, some kind of protective field. Clever. Can you shoot? Kira asked, her attention locked on flying. Not those weapons. Then get to the dorsal gun turret hallway behind you. Ladder up. It's got targeting assistance. Point, shoot, try not to hit us. Kira threw the ship into a barrel roll that made Xena's stomach revolt. Go. Xena unbuckled and moved, her balance adjusting automatically to the ship's movements. Years of fighting on rocking boats during naval battles helped. She found the ladder, climbed rapidly, and emerged into a small rotating turret with a massive gun mounted on swivels. The controls were alien but intuitive. Grips for hands, a targeting reticle projected onto a screen, triggers under her fingers. She could see the 3 speeder bikes below, gaining altitude to match the freighter's climb. The riders were firing steadily, their shots coordinated. Military tactics. These weren't random raiders, they were professionals. Xena squeezed the triggers. The quad laser cannon roared to life, sending 4 bolts of green energy streaking downward. Her first volley went wide. She was used to leading targets with thrown weapons, but this had different physics. The recoil, the energy, travel time, the way targets moved at high speed, all new variables. She adjusted, breathed. Let her warrior's instincts merge with this new tool. The second volley caught a speeder bike dead center. It exploded in a fireball that tumbled into the canyon below. The remaining 2 pilots broke formation, trying to flank the freighter from different angles. Nice shot. Kira's voice crackled through a speaker in the turret. 2 more, and we're clear. Xena tracked the left target, leading him as she would a running deer. Squeezed the trigger. Green fire lanced out. The speeder pilot juked hard right, avoiding destruction by meters. Smart. She'd need to predict his evasion pattern. The right side speeder unleashed a barrage at the freighter's underside. Xena heard metal groan and Kira curse over the comm. They were taking damage. She needed to end this fast. She fired at the right side target, deliberately aiming ahead of him. As predicted, he dodged directly into the path of her real target on the left. Xena had already swiveled the turret, firing a sustained burst at where she knew the left target would be after his own evasion maneuver. Both speeders exploded simultaneously, victims of tactical thinking that translated perfectly from ancient warfare to this high-tech battlefield. I take back every doubt I had about you, Kira said as Xena climbed back down. That was professional military precision. Where'd you learn to fight like that? Long story. Xena dropped back into the co-pilot seat. How bad's the damage? Port deflectors shot. Hull breach in cargo section 3. Nothing critical. But we're vulnerable if we hit more trouble. Kira brought the ship down to low altitude, skimming between canyon walls. We're 20 minutes from the settlement. Let's hope that was their only patrol. It wasn't. They were 15 minutes out when Kira's instruments started screaming. Multiple contacts, closing fast. Big ones. She pulled up scanner data. Damn it. Imperial patrol. TIE fighters. Xena saw them through the viewport, 6 angular ships with distinctive wing configurations, screaming toward them with predatory intent. Even without understanding the technology, she recognized hunters when she saw them. What do they want? Could be routine inspection. Could be they detected our firefight and want to investigate. Could be they're bored and looking for target practice. Kira's hands danced over controls. Empire doesn't need reasons out here. This is their galaxy, we just die in it. The lead TIE fighter's voice crackled over the comm, cold and mechanical. Unidentified freighter. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. Kira looked at Xena, then at the medical supplies in the hold. If they board us, they'll confiscate everything. Contraband or rebel supplies or whatever excuse they feel like using. Those settlers won't get their medicine. What are our options? Run or fight? Running might work. Promise is fast. Fighting is suicide. TIE fighters are military grade, and there's 6 of them. Kira's jaw clenched. I don't usually run. Bad for business. But I also don't usually die for a cargo. Xena studied the approaching fighters, her tactical mind working. 6 against 1 ship with damaged shields. The odds were terrible, but she'd faced terrible odds before, at Corinth, at Troy, against Ares himself. Can you outmaneuver them? For a while, maybe. Why? Because I have an idea. Xena's expression hardened into that cold mask her enemies had learned to fear. But it's risky, and you're probably going to think I'm insane. Kira looked at this strange warrior woman who'd dropped into her life hours ago, who fought like a demon and spoke like she'd seen 1,000 battles. Then she looked at the TIE fighters closing in for the kill. Insane works for me. What's the plan? Get me outside. On top of the hull, Kira stared. You want to what? Those fighters are fast but small. If I can get on one, that's insane. You'll get blown off the ship or freeze in the upper atmosphere, or I've jumped from greater heights. Xena's voice carried absolute certainty. I've boarded ships mid-battle before. This is just another siege. This isn't a siege. This is suicide. The TIE fighters were close now, beginning to form an attack pattern. The lead fighter's voice returned. This is your final warning. Cut engines or be destroyed. Xena stood, chakram in one hand, sword on her back. Your choice, Kira. Run, surrender, or trust me. For a long moment, the smuggler said nothing. Then she laughed a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Gods, I'm going to regret this. She slammed controls. There's an emergency hatch on the dorsal hull, right behind the turret. Magnetic boots in the locker, they'll keep you from flying off. Probably. Maybe. This is completely insane. That's what they said about taking on the Roman Empire. Xena moved toward the ladder. When I signal, dive. Give them a harder target. How will you signal? Xena's smile was predatory. You'll know. She climbed to the turret, found the magnetic boots, bulky things that locked to her feet with surprising strength, and cycled the emergency hatch. Wind screamed around her as she emerged onto the hull, 200 meters above the Tatooine desert, traveling at speeds that would have been incomprehensible to anyone from her world. The magnetic boots held. Barely. The wind tried to rip her away, but Xena spread her stance, lowered her center of gravity, and raised her chakram. The TIE fighters came in for their attack run, green laser fire beginning to stream toward the freighter. Xena waited, watched, calculated. The lead fighter passed overhead, close enough that she could see the pilot through the viewport. Her chakram flew. The chakram struck the TIE fighter's wing joint with a metallic screech that pierced even through the howling wind. Sparks erupted from the impact point, and the fighter's trajectory wobbled. The weapon rebounded at its impossible angle, defying the physics of this galaxy as it had defied the physics of her own, and struck the second fighter's cockpit viewport. Cracks spiderwebbed across the transparent steel. Then the chakram returned to Xena's hand, as both TIE fighters spiraled out of control, crashing into the canyon walls below in twin fireballs. Kira's voice exploded over the external comm. What in the name of how did you? That's impossible. Dive, now! Xena shouted back, already tracking the remaining 4 fighters as they broke formation in confusion. The broken promise dropped like a stone, and Xena's magnetic boots screamed in protest as Gi forces tried to tear her from the hull. She held on through sheer strength and stubborn will, muscles honed by years of combat flexing against artificial gravity. The remaining TIE fighters scrambled to follow, but their rigid Imperial formation tactics made them predictable. 2 fighters came around for another pass, their laser cannons lighting up. Xena rolled across the hull, an acrobatic maneuver that should have been impossible at this speed, but which her body executed with practiced precision. Blaster bolts scorched the durasteel where she'd been standing. The fighters screamed past, close enough that she felt the heat wash from their engines. Too close. They were trying to force her off the ship without destroying the freighter. They wanted the cargo intact. That gave her an advantage. As the third fighter approached from the port side, Xena threw her chakram again, but this time she aimed for the canyon wall beside them. The weapon struck stone, ricocheted at a calculated angle, and caught the TIE's wing stabilizer. The fighter lurched, overcorrected, and collided with its wingman in a spectacular explosion that painted the sky orange. 2 left. But these pilots had learned. They hung back, firing from distance, trying to disable the freighter's engines without getting close enough for Xena to reach them. Smart, cautious, the kind of tactical thinking that kept soldiers alive. Xena. Kira's voice was strained. Engines are taking heavy damage. I can't keep this up much longer. The warrior princess watched the fighters circle like vultures, her mind racing through options. She couldn't reach them from here. They'd learned to fear her weapon, but they still had to attack the freighter eventually. And when they did, one of the TIE fighters broke formation, diving low beneath the promise to strike at the vulnerable underside. Xena moved to the hull's edge, magnetic boots disengaging for one terrifying moment as she dropped and swung around the freighter's curved surface, catching herself on a maintenance grip below. The TIE pilot never saw her coming. As the fighter passed underneath, Xena released her grip and fell a controlled drop through open air that would have killed anyone without her training and physical conditioning. She landed on the TIE's upper hull with an impact that jarred her bones, magnetic boots engaging instantly to lock her down. The pilot screamed something unintelligible, the fighter bucking wildly as he tried to shake her loose. Through the viewport, Xena could see his white helmet swiveling, his gloved hands frantically working controls. She drew her sword and drove it through the thin hull plating above the cockpit. The ancient bronze blade tempered in fires and blessed by God's piercing Imperial durasteel as if it were cloth. Sparks erupted around the blade. The TIE's systems shrieked in protest. Xena twisted the sword, severing control lines, and the fighter began to spin out of control. She jumped. It was a leap of faith, timing her trajectory to match the promise's position. Magnetic boots disengaged, arms outstretched. For one eternal second she was in free fall, the desert spinning below her, death rushing up to meet her. Then her hands caught the freighter's landing gear, and she hauled herself up with the strength that had allowed her to climb fortress walls and scale cliffs under arrow fire. The TIE fighter crashed behind her, adding another plume of smoke to the canyon floor. One fighter left. The final pilot had seen enough. Through the cockpit viewport, Xena could see him banking away, choosing survival over Imperial duty. She let him go. Killing was sometimes necessary, but she took no pleasure in it. Not anymore. Xena climbed back to the dorsal hatch, cycled through, and collapsed against the inner wall, breathing hard. The magnetic boots clattered to the floor. Her hands were shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump of sustained combat. Even after all these years, her body still reacted to near death like it was new. Kira appeared in the hallway, staring at her with an expression caught between awe and terror. You were on the hull, and then you jumped onto a TIE fighter. She shook her head. Who are you? Really? Someone who's very good at not dying. Xena stood, wincing slightly as bruised muscles protested. How's the ship? Engines are shot to hell. We've got maybe 10 minutes of thrust left, then we're gliding. Kira's professional instincts reasserted themselves. But we're close. If we can reach the settlement before we lose power, we'll be fine. They made it with 3 minutes to spare. The settlement was a cluster of moisture vaporators and prefab buildings huddled in a canyon that offered some protection from the endless sun. Maybe 200 people lived here, humans, Twi'leks, a few other species Xena didn't recognize. All of them looked tired, worn down by survival in a hostile environment. The broken promise set down in a cloud of dust and dying repulsor lifts. As Xena and Kira lowered the cargo ramp, A delegation approached, led by a scarred human woman in her 50s who walked with a limp and carried herself like someone who'd once been military. "Kira Thrace," the woman said, her voice rough as sandpaper. "Heard you were bringing medicine. Didn't expect a smoking wreck. Had some trouble, Commander Varric." Kira gestured at the medical supplies. "But the cargo's intact. All of it." Varric's eyes swept over Xena, assessing with professional precision. "And who's this? New crew? Temporary hire? She's the reason we made it here at all." Kira paused. She took out 6 Imperial TIE fighters. By herself, on the outside of the ship. The commander's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect, and maybe a hint of disbelief. "Is that so?" "I did what was necessary," Xena said simply. "Your people need the medicine. That's what mattered." Varric studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We appreciate it. All of it." She gestured to several settlers who began moving the cargo crates. "Come inside. You'll want food, water, and repairs before you leave. It's the least we can offer." The settlement's central building was Spartan but functional. A long table dominated the main room, surrounded by chairs that had seen better years. Someone brought out plates of simple food, protein bars, dried fruit, water that tasted of recycling systems. Xena ate gratefully, her body's needs reasserting themselves after the combat high faded. "You fought like someone with military training," Varric said, sitting across from her. "But I don't recognize your style. What branch did you serve in?" "I wasn't military." "Not in the way you mean." Xena chose her words carefully. "Where I come from, I led groups. We fought for territory, for survival, for beliefs. Eventually, I learned to fight for something better." "Sounds like the rebellion," Kira muttered. "Sounds like a warlord," Varric corrected, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "Takes one to know one. I commanded a Republic garrison before the Empire came. Saw what happened to officers who wouldn't adapt to the new regime." She touched the scar on her face. "Chose exile over service to tyranny." Xena met her gaze steadily. "Then you understand that power without purpose is just destruction." "I do." Varric leaned back. "Which is why I'm going to make you an offer. You've got skills we need. Real combat experience, tactical thinking, and apparently the ability to take down Imperial fighters with a throwing weapon." She gestured around the settlement. "We're not soldiers anymore. Most of us are just colonists trying to survive. But the Empire keeps squeezing, raiders keep attacking, and Jabba's thugs keep demanding protection money we don't have. We need someone who can train us, organize our defense, make us something more than victims." "I'm not staying," Xena said immediately. "I have somewhere I need to be, someone I need to find." "I figured. But the repairs to Kira's ship will take at least 2 days, while you're here anyway." Varric spread her hands. "Help us. Teach us what you know. In return, I can offer information. We're connected to other settlements, other resistance cells. If you're looking for something or someone specific in this galaxy, we might be able to point you in the right direction." Xena glanced at Kira, who shrugged. "She's not wrong about the repairs. Promise needs a new power coupling and half a dozen other parts. Unless you want to walk across the desert, we're grounded anyway. 2 days." Xena could spare 2 days, and if these people had information about dimensional anomalies, Force users, or anyone who might understand how she'd arrived in this galaxy, it could be worth the delay. Besides, there was something familiar about this situation. A settlement of refugees, threatened by multiple enemies, looking for someone to make them strong enough to survive. She'd been that person before. Many times. 2 days, Xena agreed. "I'll teach you what I can. Basic combat, tactical formations, how to fight against superior numbers. But I'm not building an army. I'm giving you the tools to defend yourselves." Varric extended her hand. "That's all we're asking." As they shook on it, the settlement's alarm suddenly wailed a harsh klaxon that sent everyone scrambling. Varric was on her feet instantly, limping toward the door. Raiders, everyone to defensive positions. Xena followed, emerging into the canyon to see a dust cloud approaching from the south. Through the haze, she could make out speeder bikes, dozens of them, far more than had attacked the Promise, and behind the speeders came something larger, a repulsor tank with heavy weapons mounted on its turret. That's new, Kira breathed, her hand already on her blaster. They've never come with armor before, because they never thought we were worth the effort, Varric said grimly. She turned to Xena. Still want to help us? Xena's hand found her chakram, and that cold warrior's smile spread across her face. The smile that had once terrified armies, the smile that had toppled kingdoms. Your training starts now, she said. Get me 20 fighters with blasters. Position them on the high ground canyon walls, building rooftops. Tell them to wait for my signal and aim for the speeders, not the tank. What are you going to do? Varric asked. What I always do. Xena started walking toward the approaching raiders, her stride confident and unhurried. I'm going to make them afraid. Behind her, she heard Kira laugh in disbelief. She's insane. I like her. The raiders came on like a storm, weapons firing, certain of their victory. They'd terrorized this settlement for months. They had numbers, technology, and fear on their side. They'd never faced Xena. The raiders closed to within 200 meters before Xena stopped walking. She stood alone in the center of the canyon, a single figure in leather armor against dozens of armed attackers. To them, she must have looked like easy prey, a fool making a dramatic gesture before inevitable death. They didn't know her battle cry could shatter morale as effectively as any weapon. Allah lies. The sound erupted from her lungs with the force of decades of warfare, a primal scream that echoed off canyon walls and stopped the lead speeders dead in their tracks. It was the sound of Xena the Destroyer, Xena the Conqueror, the woman who'd burned cities and broken armies before she learned mercy. The raiders hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Xena's chakram flew in a wide arc, striking the lead speeder's control vanes. The vehicle flipped, throwing its rider into the sand. The weapon ricocheted impossibly off rock faces, striking 3 more speeders in rapid succession before returning to her hand. 4 raiders down before they'd closed to effective firing range. Then the blaster fire began. Xena moved. Not with the superhuman speed of Force users she'd heard whispered about in Mos Eisley, but with the honed reflexes of someone who'd spent a lifetime dodging arrows, spears, and swords. The key was reading the shooter's body language, anticipating where they'd aim before they fired. It was a skill that translated from ancient warfare to this high-tech battlefield better than anyone would have expected. Red energy bolts scorched the sand around her as she ran, rolled, and dove. Her chakram flew again, this time targeting the repulsor tank's sensor array. The weapon struck true, and the tank's turret began swiveling wildly, its targeting systems compromised. Now, Varric's voice carried from the canyon walls. 20 blasters opened fire from elevated positions. The settlers weren't trained soldiers, their shots were wild, undisciplined, but volume of fire had its own effectiveness. 3 more speeders went down, their riders scrambling for cover as energy bolts rained around them. The raiders scattered, their confident assault dissolving into chaos. They'd expected easy victims, not organized resistance, not a lone warrior who fought like a demon given flesh. A weakway raider charged Xena directly, firing his blaster on full auto. She waited until he was close, reading his pattern, then threw her chakram at an angle that seemed wrong until the weapon bounced off his speeder's chassis and caught him in the back. He went down hard. The chakram completed its circuit and slapped back into her palm, but there were too many. Even with the settlers' support fire, the raiders were regrouping. The tank's backup systems came online, its turret locking onto the canyon wall where most of the defenders crouched. Xena saw the danger immediately. That cannon would slaughter them. She sprinted toward the tank, zigzagging as raiders tried to track her with blaster fire. A bolt grazed her arm. Pain flared, her first real wound in this galaxy. She ignored it. Pain was information. It told her she was still alive. The tank's cannon fired. The canyon wall exploded in a shower of rock and dust. Xena heard screams, settlers hit by debris, maybe worse. Her jaw clenched. These people weren't soldiers. They were farmers, refugees, families, and she'd told them to fight, just like she'd once told villagers to fight for her when she was a warlord. How many had died following her orders then? No, not this time. These people are defending their homes. That's different. She reached the tank and leaped onto its hull, her boots finding purchase on the hot metal. The turret began rotating, trying to target her, but she was too close, inside its firing arc. Her sword came out, and she drove it into the seam between the turret and the base, not trying to penetrate armor, but to jam the mechanism. The turret ground to a halt, servo motors whining in protest. Xena pulled her sword free and moved to the hatch, wrenching it open with enhanced strength born from desperation. Inside, 2 raiders stared up at her in shock. "Out," she said simply, chakram spinning on her finger in a clear threat. They scrambled out and ran. She let them go. Mercy when possible. That was who she was now. But the other raiders weren't interested in mercy. A concussion grenade arced through the air, landing near Xena's position. She saw it, recognized the threat even without knowing the specific technology, and dove clear. The explosion lifted her off her feet and slammed her into the sand 10 meters away. Her ears rang. Blood trickled from her nose. The world spun as she forced herself to her hands and knees, sword still gripped in one fist. Through blurred vision, she saw raiders advancing, weapons raised. They were shouting something, probably demands for surrender. Xena had never been good at surrendering. She launched herself forward in a low tackle, catching the nearest raider at the knees. They went down together, and her elbow found his throat with precision that came from muscle memory. He stopped moving. Another raider swung a vibro club at her head. She rolled under it, came up inside his guard, and struck the pressure point at his shoulder. His arm went limp. Her follow-up strike to his temple put him down, but there were too many, and she was hurt. A blaster shot caught her in the side. The leather armor absorbed some impact, but she felt ribs crack. Another shot grazed her thigh. She stumbled, and that moment of weakness brought 3 raiders swarming toward her. Then Kira was there, blaster barking rapidly, dropping 2 raiders before they reached Xena. "Stay down, hero. We've got this." The settlers were advancing now, emboldened by Xena's assault on the tank. They weren't skilled fighters, but they had numbers and fury born from months of oppression. The raiders, suddenly facing real resistance, began to break. "Fall back," someone shouted. "It's not worth it." The remaining raiders retreated to their speeders and fled, leaving behind destroyed vehicles, wounded comrades, and the smoking wreckage of their vaunted tank. Victory, but at a cost. Xena let Kira help her to her feet, pressing a hand against her bleeding side. The wounds weren't fatal, she'd survived worse 100 times, but they reminded her that this galaxy could kill her just as easily as her own world had tried to. "You're completely insane," Kira said, but there was admiration in her voice. "Charging a tank with a sword. Who does that?" "Someone who's out of practice," Xena admitted, wincing as pain lanced through her ribs. "In my world, I'd have had an army at my back." Varric approached, her face grim despite the victory. "We lost 4 people, another 6 wounded, but without you." She shook her head. "We'd have lost everyone, the medicine, the supplies, everything. 4 dead." Xena felt the familiar weight settle on her conscience. She'd saved lives today, but she'd also led people into battle where some wouldn't return. The mathematics of war never changed, no matter which world you fought in. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for your losses. Don't be. They died defending their home. That's a good death." Varric's expression hardened. "But this isn't over. Those raiders will be back, probably with more friends, and they'll have a new respect for what we can do. Next time will be worse. Then we make them afraid to come back at all." Xena said. For the next 2 days, I train your people. Not just to fight, but to think like warriors, to use terrain, tactics, psychology, to make this settlement something even armies think twice about attacking. Can you do that in 2 days? Xena thought of the village militias she'd trained in her warlord days, the peasant armies she'd forged into effective fighting forces. 2 days wasn't much, but it was enough to teach the basics, enough to give them a chance. We'll find out, she said. The next 48 hours were brutal. Xena pushed the settlers hard, running them through combat drills from dawn until well after dark. She taught them formation fighting, how to present a unified front rather than fighting as individuals. She showed them pressure points on the various species that lived in this galaxy, adapting her knowledge to alien anatomies through trial and observation. She trained them in small unit tactics, ambush techniques, and most importantly, how to kill efficiently when mercy wasn't an option. Some struggled, some quit, but most stayed, driven by the memory of loved ones lost to raiders, by the taste of victory they'd experienced, by the iron will of this strange warrior woman who fought like legends come to life. Kira worked on repairing the broken promise, scavenging parts from destroyed raider vehicles. In the evenings, she'd join Xena at the settlement's small cantina, sharing drinks and stories. You remind me of someone I knew, Kira said one night, nursing a glass of Corellian whiskey. Alliance commander I ran supplies for during the early days of the rebellion, had that same look in her eyes, like she was carrying the weight of every soldier who died under her command. Did she survive? Xena asked. Last I heard, yeah, running Black Ops somewhere in the Outer Rim. Kira studied her drink. You ever think about joining up? The rebellion, I mean. They could use someone with your skills. I'm not looking for another war. Pretty sure war found you anyway. Kira gestured at the settlement around them. These people would follow you now. You know that, right? If you asked them to march on Jabba's palace, half would probably say yes. Xena's expression darkened. I'm not building an army. Not again. Why not? You're good at it. Because I know where that road leads. Xena's voice carried old pain, old regrets. I spent years conquering, destroying, building empires on corpses. I won't go back to that, ever. Kira was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. We all have things we're running from. She raised her glass. To running, then. May we always stay a step ahead. Xena clinked her glass against Kira's, but the words echoed in her mind. Running. Was that what she was doing? Running from responsibility, from the chance to make a difference in this galaxy? Or was she being smart, focusing on her true goal, finding Gabrielle? Getting home? The question haunted her through the night. On the second morning, Varric called Xena to the communications room, a small chamber filled with equipment Xena was only beginning to understand. We've been asking our contacts about dimensional anomalies, force disturbances, anything that might explain how you got here, Varric said, pulling up data on a flickering screen. Got a hit. There's a Jedi or someone claiming to be Jedi operating out of a temple on Deveron, supposed to have knowledge of ancient force techniques, including something about tears in the fabric of reality. Xena's heart quickened. Where's Deveron? 3 systems away. Maybe a week's travel if you can find transport. Varric hesitated. But there's a complication. The temple's in Imperial territory. They've been hunting force sensitives since the Purge. Anyone looking for Jedi knowledge is painting a target on their back. I'll take that risk. Figured you would. Varric handed her a data chip. Coordinates, contact codes, everything we have. And Xena? The former commander's scarred face softened slightly. Thank you. For everything. You gave us more than training, you gave us hope. That's worth more than any weapon. Xena accepted the chip, uncomfortable with gratitude. Your people did the real work. I just showed them what they were capable of. That's what the best commanders do. Varric saluted, a crisp military gesture. May the Force be with you, even if you don't believe in it. An hour later, Xena stood at the Broken Promises boarding ramp, watching the settlers go about their morning routines. They moved differently now, with confidence, with purpose. They'd remember this victory. They'd build on it, and she was leaving them behind. This is the right choice, she told herself. Gabrielle is waiting. Home is waiting. But part of her, the part that had once been Xena the Destroyer, that had thrived on leadership and conquest, whispered that she was abandoning people who needed her. Again. Ready? Kira called from the cockpit. Xena climbed the ramp. Ready. The broken promise lifted off, carrying her toward Deveron, toward answers, toward the next stage of her journey through this impossible galaxy. Behind her, the settlement shrank to a speck in the endless desert. She didn't look back. Looking back had never helped. The journey to Deveron took 6 days, not 1 week. Kira knew shortcuts, hyperspace routes that weren't on Imperial charts, smugglers' paths through asteroid fields that shaved hours off standard travel times. The broken promise might look like scrap, but it moved through the galaxy with the efficiency of a ship that had spent years evading customs, patrols, and Imperial inspections. Xena spent the time learning. She studied star charts, memorizing the political geography of this vast galaxy. She practiced with a training blaster Kira provided, adapting her combat instincts to ranged energy weapons. She read reports on the holonet about the war between Empire and Rebellion, absorbing the strategies, the key players, the ideological divisions that drove this conflict. It reminded her of the Trojan War. 2 massive powers locked in struggle, with smaller nations forced to choose sides or be crushed between them. She'd navigated those waters before. She could do it again. You're a fast learner, Kira observed on the 4th day, watching Xena field strip and reassemble the blaster with practiced efficiency. Most people take months to get comfortable with Imperial tech. I've always been good at adapting to new weapons. Xena slid the power pack back into place. On my world, I mastered the sword, the chakram, the staff, the bow. This is just another tool. Your world must have been interesting. All swords and ancient weapons, but you fight like you've seen real war. Major campaigns, not just bandit raids. Kira leaned against the cargo hold wall. You ever going to tell me the real story? Xena considered. Kira had earned some truth. I'm not from this galaxy. I was pulled through some kind of dimensional rift. One moment I was fighting in my world, the next I was falling onto Tatooine. To her credit, Kira didn't laugh or call her crazy. She just nodded slowly. That explains the confusion about basic tech and why you fight like history came alive. She paused. This person you're looking for, Gabrielle, she's in your world? Yes. And you think this Jedi on Deveron can send you back? I don't know. But it's the only lead I have. Xena's hand unconsciously touched the chakram at her hip. I have to try. Fair enough. Kira pushed off the wall. We're dropping out of hyperspace in 2 hours. Deveron's not exactly friendly to off-worlders right now. Empire's got a garrison there because of mineral mining operations. We'll need to be careful. Careful isn't usually my approach. Yeah, I've noticed. Kira grinned. Try it anyway, just this once. Deveron was a world of red stone and thick forests, its terrain broken by deep canyons and ancient geological formations. The Jedi temple Varric had mentioned was located in the remote northern hemisphere, far from Imperial mining operations and urban centers. Getting there required landing at a small spaceport, bribing a local guide, and then trekking 3 days through wilderness that tested even Xena's considerable endurance. The guide, a Deveronian male named Ka, was nervous throughout the journey. The temple's been abandoned for years, he explained as they climbed a narrow mountain path. Since the Jedi Purge, some say it's haunted by the ghosts of those who died there. Others say there's still someone living in the ruins, but they don't want to be found. Someone is there, Xena said with certainty. Otherwise, Varric's contacts wouldn't have mentioned it. Maybe. Ka's horns gleamed in the setting sun. But if there is someone, they might not appreciate visitors. The Empire pays good credits for information about Force users, makes people desperate. Are you desperate? Xena's hand moved casually to her sword hilt. Not that desperate. Ka raised his hands placatingly. I'm just saying be ready for anything. They reached the temple at dawn on the third day. It was smaller than Xena expected, built into the side of a cliff face with architectural lines that suggested both elegance and defensive practicality. Vines had overgrown much of the structure, and blast marks scarred the entrance, evidence of violence from years past. This is as far as I go, Ka said. I'll wait at the base camp for 3 days. If you're not back by then, I'm assuming you're dead and leaving. Understood. Xena paid him the agreed upon credits and approached the temple alone. The entrance hall was empty, dust thick on the floor, but there were footprints, recent ones, leading deeper into the structure. Someone was definitely here. Xena drew her sword and advanced carefully, every sense alert. The footprints led to a meditation chamber in the temple's heart. A single figure sat cross-legged in the center of the room, back turned to the entrance. Human, male, wearing tattered Jedi robes that had once been fine but now showed years of rough use. I felt you coming, the figure said without turning. His voice was aged, roughened by time and hardship. You carry violence like a cloak. Death follows in your wake. Yet there's something else. Redemption, perhaps, or the desire for it. Are you the Jedi? Xena asked, not lowering her weapon. I was, once. Now I'm just a survivor hiding from an empire that wants me dead. The figure finally turned, revealing a weathered face marked by scars and a milky white left eye. My name is Soran Vess. I was a Jedi Knight during the Clone Wars. Now I'm the keeper of knowledge that the Empire would destroy if they knew it existed. Xena sheathed her sword, a gesture of cautious trust. I need your help. I was pulled into this galaxy from another world, another dimension. I'm looking for a way back. Soran's good eye widened slightly. Another dimension? That's theoretically possible through the Force, but I've never heard of anyone actually achieving it. He stood with the careful movements of someone whose body had been broken and healed wrong. Tell me everything. Xena recounted her story, the battle with Ares, the dimensional rift, her arrival on Tatooine. Soran listened intently, occasionally asking questions that suggested deep knowledge of esoteric Force abilities. The Force connects all living things, Soran finally said, but it exists differently in different dimensions. What you experienced sounds like a world between worlds breach, a nexus point where realities intersect. The ancient Jedi knew of such places but considered them too dangerous to explore. He limped to a wall covered in faded murals. There are legends of artifacts that could access these nexus points, Sith holocrons, mostly. The dark side has always been more willing to tear reality apart in pursuit of power. Where would I find such an artifact? That's the problem. Most were destroyed during the Purge. The few that remain are in Imperial hands or lost in places even more dangerous. Soran traced his fingers over the mural. It showed robed figures standing before a swirling portal. But there's one possibility. A Sith temple on Malachor. It's forbidden space. The Empire's blockaded the entire system because of the dark side energies there. But if any place in this galaxy still holds the knowledge you seek, it would be Malachor. Xena absorbed this information, her tactical mind already working through the implications. How do I get past an Imperial blockade? You don't. Not directly. Soran turned back to her, but I know someone who might help. A rebel cell operating in this sector has been planning a strike on Imperial assets near Malachor. If you could convince them to include you in their operation, you want me to join the rebellion. I want you to survive long enough to find your way home. The rebellion has resources, ships, fighters who can get you where you need to go. In exchange, you'd have to help them with their mission. It always came back to this. Another war, another side to choose. Xena had sworn she wouldn't build armies, wouldn't lead people into battle for causes that weren't her own. But if the rebellion was her only path to Gabrielle, how do I contact them? She asked. Soran pulled a small data device from his robes. These are coordinates for a rebel safe house on Lothal. Tell them Soran Vess sent you. Tell them. He hesitated. Tell them I'm still alive. still fighting in my own way. They'll help you if they believe you're sincere. And if they don't, then you'll have to convince them the same way you convinced me." Soran's scarred face quirked in something like a smile, with that undeniable sense that you're someone who changes the fate of worlds, whether you want to or not. Xena took the data device. "Thank you. For the information. For the risk of helping me. Don't thank me yet. Malachor is death for most who venture there. The dark side corrupts, destroys, drives people mad. If you're not careful, you'll lose yourself long before you find a way home." Soran's good eye studied her intensely. "I can sense your past, warrior. The darkness you've already walked through. Malachor will call to that darkness. It will offer you power, vengeance, everything you once craved. You must be strong enough to refuse. I've faced darkness before. I survived. Not like this. The dark side of the Force isn't just evil, it's seductive. It promises strength to protect those you love. It whispers that the ends justify the means. It sounds rational, reasonable, until you wake up and realize you've become the monster you once fought against." Xena thought of Ares, of the temptations she'd faced and sometimes succumbed to in her darker days. "I have someone waiting for me. She keeps me honest. Even when she's not here, I carry her with me." Her hand touched her chest, over her heart. "That's stronger than any darkness." Soran nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you have a chance. May the Force be with you, Xena of another world. I hope you find your way home." The journey back to the spaceport was uneventful. Car was waiting as promised, and they made the trek in comfortable silence. Xena's mind was churning through plans, contingencies, risks, Lothal, the rebellion, Malachor, each step taking her deeper into this galaxy's conflicts, further from the simple goal of getting home. But there was no other way. Not that she could see. Kira was in the Promise's cargo hold when Xena returned, working on a malfunctioning motivator. She looked up as Xena climbed the ramp. "You're alive. That's good. Did you find what you needed? Information and a new destination?" Xena handed her the data chip with Lothal's coordinates. "We're going to meet the rebellion." Kira's hands stilled on the tools. "You're serious? You're actually going to sign up with the Alliance?" "Not signing up. Making a deal. They help me reach Malachor. I help them with whatever they're planning." "Malachor." Kira's face paled. "That's a death world. Forbidden system. The kind of place smart people avoid even thinking about. Can you get us to Lothal?" "Yeah, I can get us there. Question is whether you're ready for what comes next." Kira set down her tools and stood. "The rebellion isn't like those settlers on Tatooine. These are professional insurgents, trained soldiers, people who've sacrificed everything to fight the Empire. They're going to test you. They're going to demand proof you're not an Imperial spy. And if they decide to trust you, they're going to expect you to actually fight, not just make a deal and walk away. I'll do what's necessary. That's what I'm afraid of." Kira sighed. "Look, I've stayed neutral this whole time. Transported rebel goods, Imperial goods, criminal goods. Didn't matter as long as the credits were good. But if I take you to that safe house, if I introduce you to the Alliance, I'm choosing a side. You understand that?" Xena met her eyes. "You don't have to do this. Drop me at the nearest port. I'll find another way." For a long moment, Kira said nothing. Then she laughed, that short, sharp bark that Xena had come to recognize as her way of processing impossible decisions. "Ah, hell. I was getting bored with neutrality anyway. Besides, someone needs to keep you from getting killed by your own recklessness. Is that what we're calling it? Either that or suicidal heroism. Take your pick." Kira moved to the cockpit. "Strap in. Lothal's 4 days away, and I want to make it in 3. Time to see if the rebellion is ready for a warrior princess from another dimension." As the broken promise lifted off and angled toward the stars, Xena stared out at the red landscape of Deveron falling away below. Each decision took her further from home, but closer to the only path she could see. She thought of Gabrielle, wondered if her partner was searching for her too, wondered if time passed the same way in both dimensions. Wait for me, she thought. I'm coming back. Whatever it takes. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and Deveron disappeared in a blur of stars. Lothal was a world caught between two identities. From orbit, it looked peaceful, grasslands stretching to horizons, scattered settlements, a beauty that spoke of simpler times. But as the broken promise descended through the atmosphere, the scars became visible. Imperial factories belching smoke, patrol ships circling like predators, the capital city of Lothal enclosed by walls and checkpoints that turned it into a prison as much as a population center. Empires had its claws in this place for years, Kira explained as she navigated toward the outskirts of the capital. Used to be a quiet agricultural world. Now it's a manufacturing hub for TIE fighters and Imperial equipment. The people here have learned what occupation really means. Xena studied the landscape below, seeing the tactical situation immediately. The settlements were isolated, vulnerable. The Empire controlled transportation, communication, resources. Classic occupation strategy: make the population dependent, crush any resistance before it can organize. She'd done the same thing herself in her warlord days. The memory made her jaw clench. The safe house coordinates led them to an abandoned warehouse district on the city's edge. Kira set the ship down in a cleared area between derelict buildings, engines powering down with a tired whine. "This is it," Kira said, checking her blaster's charge pack. "Remember, these people have been fighting and dying while the rest of the galaxy looked away. They won't trust easily. I don't need their trust, just their help." You might be surprised how much those two things overlap. They approached the designated building, a 3-story structure with blast-scarred walls and windows that had been bricked up long ago. Xena's instincts immediately catalogued defensible positions, sight lines, escape routes. Whoever chose this location knew what they were doing. Before they reached the door, it opened. A Twi'lek woman stood in the entrance, a blaster rifle held with professional competence. Behind her, Xena could see at least 3 more figures in the shadows, weapons trained on the newcomers. "That's close enough," the Twi'lek said. Her leku bore scars from old burns, and her eyes held the hardness of someone who'd seen too many friends die. "State your business." "We're looking for the rebellion," Kira said carefully. "Soran Vess sent us." The Twi'lek's expression flickered surprise, quickly masked. "Soran's dead. Has been for 3 years. He's alive," Xena said, "hiding in a Jedi temple on Devaran. He gave us these coordinates and told us to mention his name. Anyone could say that." "Prove it." Xena pulled out the data device Soran had given her. "He said to tell you he's still fighting in his own way, that he hasn't forgotten." The Twi'lek studied them for a long, tense moment. Then she lowered her rifle slightly. "Inside, quickly." Imperial patrols sweep this district every 2 hours. The interior was a functional command post, portable equipment, sleeping mats, weapons racks, and a central holo table displaying tactical data. About a dozen people occupied the space. A mix of species and ages. All of them looked lean, hard, ready. These were survivors. A human man in his 40s approached, his right arm replaced by a cybernetic prosthetic. "I'm Captain Dane Oros. This is Phoenix Cell, or what's left of it. If Soran really sent you, then you have our attention, for now." His eyes swept over Xena, assessing. "You don't look like typical rebel material." "I'm not here to join your rebellion," Xena said bluntly. "I need to get to Malachor. Soran said you were planning operations near there, and why would we take a stranger to one of the most dangerous systems in the galaxy? Because I can help you with whatever you're planning. I have skills you need." Dane's expression turned skeptical. "Everyone says that. Usually right before they get someone killed." He gestured at the others. "We're professionals, former Republic military, Clone Wars veterans, people who've been fighting this war since the beginning. What could you possibly offer that we don't already have?" Xena's eyes hardened. "Test me. Give me a challenge. If I fail, I leave. If I succeed, you consider my proposal." The Twi'lek woman, whose name was Hera, stepped forward. "We've got a problem that needs solving. There's an Imperial depot 20 kilometers from here. Small garrison, maybe 30 stormtroopers, holding weapons and supplies we desperately need. We've been planning a raid for weeks, but it's heavily fortified. Every scenario we run ends with massive casualties. You want me to help you take it? No, I want you to take it. Alone." Hera's smile was cold. "You claim to have skills. Prove it. Get inside that depot, open the main gates, and signal us. We'll handle the rest. But if you can infiltrate an Imperial facility by yourself, then maybe you're worth the risk of bringing to Malachor." Dane looked like he wanted to object, but Hera silenced him with a glance. "If she's Imperial bait, better to find out now. If she's genuine, we get the supplies we need. Either way, we learn something useful." Xena considered the challenge. A fortified position, 30 trained soldiers, and she'd be going in alone without reconnaissance or preparation. Tactically, it was nearly suicide, but she'd infiltrated fortress cities before. She'd walked into enemy camps and walked out with their battle plans. This was just another variation on an old theme. "When?" she asked. "Tonight. There's a shift change at midnight, smallest crew on duty. That's your window." Hera pulled up a holo-display of the depot. 3 guard towers, perimeter fence with sensors, main gate here, armory there, barracks there. Stormtroopers are trained and equipped, but they're used to fighting farmers, not professional infiltrators. They'll learn the difference. Xena studied the layout, her mind already formulating plans. "I'll need one thing. A distraction on the north side at midnight. Something loud enough to draw attention but not so obvious it triggers full alert. We can manage that." Hera's expression remained skeptical. "But understand, if you fail, if you're captured, we won't come for you. Can't risk the cell for one person." "I wouldn't expect you to." Kira had been silent throughout the exchange, but now she spoke up. "I'm going with her." "No," Xena said immediately. "This isn't your fight." "Yeah, well, I'm making it my fight." Kira's jaw set stubbornly. "You need someone watching your back. Someone who actually knows how Imperial security systems work." "She has a point," Dane admitted. 2-person insertion has better success rates than solo operations. Xena wanted to refuse, wanted to keep Kira out of danger, to avoid being responsible for another person's life. But the tactical advantage was real, and time was running out. "Fine," she said, "but if things go wrong, you run." "Understood? Sure." Kira's grin suggested she had no intention of following that order. "I'll run right after you do." They spent the afternoon preparing. Hera provided equipment, comlink headsets, door spikes for bypassing locks, and small explosive charges for emergencies. Xena declined the offered blaster rifle, keeping her sword and chakram. The rebels looked at her ancient weapons with bemused skepticism, but after hearing about the TIE fighters on Tatooine, they didn't argue. At 11:30, a speeder dropped them 3 kilometers from the depot. They covered the remaining distance on foot, using the grassland's natural undulations for cover. The depot appeared exactly as the holo display had shown, a cluster of prefab buildings surrounded by high fencing, guard towers at 3 corners, floodlights illuminating the perimeter. 30 stormtroopers, Kira whispered as they observed from a low ridge. Probably an officer or two. Standard patrol patterns every 15 minutes. Those towers have automated blasters, motion sensors, the works. This is going to be fun. Define fun. The kind where we probably don't die horribly. At midnight precisely, an explosion erupted on the depot's north side. Hera's distraction. Not close enough to damage anything, but loud enough to get attention. The guard towers swiveled toward the noise. Stormtroopers poured out of the barracks, rushing to investigate. "Now," Xena said. They moved low and fast, reaching the eastern fence while attention was focused elsewhere. Kira pulled out a device and attached it to the fence. "This'll cut power to this section for about 60 seconds. After that, alarms start screaming." The fence section went dark. Xena and Kira slipped through, immediately pressing against the shadows of a storage building. Through her headset, Xena could hear confused comm chatter as stormtroopers searched for the source of the explosion. "Nothing here, sir. Might have been an animal or malfunction. Stay alert. Double the patrols. That complicated things." More patrols meant less room for error. Xena signaled Kira to follow and moved toward the armory, a reinforced structure with a single entrance and no windows. 2 stormtroopers stood guard outside. "I'll handle them," Xena breathed. "You get the door open." Before Kira could object, Xena was moving. She came around the corner at full speed, her battle cry erupting from her lungs. Alalays. That primal sound of fury that had broken armies. The stormtroopers turned, weapons coming up. Too slow. Xena's chakram flew, striking the first trooper's blaster rifle and sending it spinning away. The weapon ricocheted and caught the second trooper's helmet with a metallic clang that echoed across the compound. She was on them before they recovered. Her sword hilt struck the first trooper's helmet at the weak point where neck met armor, and he dropped. The second trooper swung his rifle like a club. Xena ducked under it, swept his legs, and put him down with a precise strike to the nerve cluster in his shoulder. Both stormtroopers unconscious in under 5 seconds. "Okay," Kira said, hurrying forward with her door spike. "That was impressive. Alarms will trigger any moment. How long to open this?" 2 minutes. Maybe 3. "I'll buy you the time." Xena moved to the corner of the building, peering around to see the main compound. Stormtroopers were returning from investigating the explosion, their posture still alert but no longer in crisis mode. She counted 18 visible targets. More would be inside the barracks or command center. Her chakram spun on her finger as she calculated angles, trajectories, timing. Then she stepped into the open and through. The weapon sang through the air, striking a floodlight first, plunging half the compound into darkness. It ricocheted, impossibly defying physics and probability, to strike a power junction box. Sparks erupted, and another section of lights went dark. The chakram bounced off a water tower, angled down to strike a fuel canister near a speeder, and ignited it in a small explosion that sent stormtroopers scattering. Then it returned to her hand. The compound erupted into chaos. Stormtroopers fired blindly into the darkness, their shots going wide. An officer was shouting orders, trying to restore discipline. Xena threw her chakram again, targeting communications equipment mounted on the command center. It struck true, and suddenly the stormtroopers couldn't coordinate. "Got it," Kira called. The armory door hissed open. "Signal the rebels." "Tell them to move in." Kira keyed her comlink, while Xena covered the approach. Stormtroopers were advancing now, their night vision equipment cutting through the darkness she'd created. Blaster fire erupted toward her position. She rolled behind a storage crate as bolts scorched the ground where she'd been standing. This was the dangerous part. She couldn't fight 30 stormtroopers in direct combat, even she had limits, but she could keep them confused, keep them off balance, until the rebels arrived. Her chakram flew again and again, each throw targeting weapons, equipment, or weak points in stormtrooper formations. She moved constantly, never staying in one position long enough for them to concentrate fire. It was guerrilla warfare, the tactics of a lighter force against a stronger opponent. She'd perfected these techniques fighting Rome's legions. A stormtrooper got close enough to swing a rifle at her head. She blocked with her sword, redirected his momentum, and used a pressure point strike to paralyze his trigger finger. Another came from her left. She threw him into his companion with enhanced strength born from desperation. Then the main gates exploded inward. The rebels poured through a dozen fighters with Hera at the lead, firing with practiced precision. The stormtroopers, already confused and disorganized, broke under the coordinated assault. Some surrendered, most fled. Within 5 minutes, the depot was secure. Dane approached Xena, his cybernetic arm whirring as he lowered his weapon. He shook his head. "That was the most aggressive infiltration I've ever seen. You didn't infiltrate, you attacked, and somehow made it look subtle. It got the job done, Xena said, breathing hard. Her side ached where the wound from Tatooine still hadn't fully healed. Do I pass your test? Hera was already directing teams to load the captured supplies, but she paused long enough to nod at Xena. You pass. Whatever you are, soldier, mercenary, lunatic, you're effective. That counts for something. So you'll help me reach Malachor. We'll discuss it. Back at the safe house, Hera's expression remained guarded. But understand, we don't do anything for free. If we're taking you to Malachor, you're helping us with our operation there. Non-negotiable. What operation? One that might change the course of this war. If we survive it. Dane gestured toward the waiting speeders. Come on. Imperial reinforcements will be here within the hour. Time to disappear. As they loaded up and fled into the Lothal night, Xena caught Kira's eye. The smuggler gave her a tired grin and a thumbs up, apparently a universal gesture of approval. One more test passed. One step closer to Malachor, one step closer to home, but also one step deeper into a war that wasn't hers. A war she'd sworn not to fight. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Phoenix Cell's base shifted locations every 3 days, standard insurgency protocol. By the time Xena and Kira returned with the captured Imperial supplies, the rebels had already relocated to a series of caves in Lothal's northern highlands. Natural rock formations provided cover from aerial surveillance, and sensor scrambling equipment made the base practically invisible to Imperial scans. Inside the main cavern, Dane gathered the core team around a holo projector. 7 people in total, the survivors of operations that had cost Phoenix Cell dearly over the years. Each face carried scars, both visible and hidden. Malachor, Dane said, activating the display. A barren world appeared, its surface broken by massive canyons and strange angular structures. Forbidden by both Empire and what's left of the Republic, the Jedi feared it, the Sith coveted it, and right now, it holds something we desperately need. The display zoomed in on a structure deep within one of Malachor's canyons, a temple of distinctive architecture built from stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. This is a Sith temple, Hera continued. According to intelligence we've gathered, it contains a superweapon, an ancient device capable of destroying organic life while leaving technology intact. The Empire's been trying to access it for years, but the dark side energy surrounding Malachor makes it nearly impossible for their troops to operate effectively. Xena studied the temple's layout. If it's so dangerous, why risk going after it? Because we're not trying to activate it. Dane's expression was grim. We're trying to destroy it. If the Empire ever figures out how to use that weapon, the war's over. They could wipe out entire planets of living beings and claim the infrastructure. It's genocide on a scale we can't allow. So your plan is to infiltrate Imperial blockaded space, land on a death world saturated with corrupting energy, break into a Sith temple, and destroy a superweapon that's survived for thousands of years. Kira's voice dripped with skepticism. That's your genius strategy? We never said it was genius, Hera replied dryly. But it's necessary, and it's where we're going in 3 days, with or without you. What about my needs? Xena asked. I need access to that temple to find information about dimensional travel, if you're planning to destroy it. The weapons in the temple's lower levels, Dane interrupted. The archives and holocron vaults are higher up. You'll have time to search while we plant charges, but we all leave together, and nothing stops us from destroying that weapon. Xena weighed her options. She didn't care about the Empire's superweapon, but she needed access to that temple, and the rebels were offering her the only realistic path to reach it. Sometimes you had to make compromises to achieve your goals. She'd learned that lesson painfully over the years. I'm in, she said. On one condition. If the dark side corruption is as dangerous as you say, I want a way to pull anyone out who's compromised. Leaving people behind isn't acceptable. Admirable sentiment, a new voice said from the cavern entrance. but naive. Everyone turned. A figure emerged from the shadows, a human male in his 30s, wearing dark armor and carrying a lightsaber hilt at his belt. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Even without understanding the Force, Xena could feel something dangerous about him. "This is Kael Vorin," Dane said stiffly. "Former Jedi Padawan who survived the Purge. He's been advising us on Force-related matters." "Former Jedi?" Xena studied him carefully. "What are you now?" "Pragmatic." Kael's eyes were cold, calculating. The Jedi Order died because they refused to adapt. They clung to their precious code while the galaxy burned. I learned from their mistakes. He approached the holo-display. "Malachor will test all of you. The dark side doesn't just corrupt through obvious temptation, it offers power when you're desperate, vengeance when you're angry, strength when you're weak. It's insidious." "Sounds like you speak from experience," Xena said. "I do. I've walked the edge between light and dark for years. It's the only way to survive in this galaxy." Kael's gaze fixed on her. "You're the one who took the depot. I heard about your methods. Aggressive, brutal when necessary, but you pulled back from killing when you could have. That shows control. You'll need more of that on Malachor. I've dealt with corruption before. Not like this. The dark side of the Force is alive in that place. It will dig into your memories, find your deepest regrets, and use them against you." Kael's expression hardened. "I've seen strong people break within hours. If you're coming with us, I need to know you can resist." Xena thought of Ares, of the temptations he'd offered over the years. Power, an army, the chance to conquer nations again. She'd refused because Gabrielle had shown her another way, because she'd learned that true strength came from choosing right over easy. "I can resist," she said with quiet certainty. Kael studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll see. The ship leaves at dawn in 3 days. Use the time to prepare physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever works for you, because once we're on Malachor, there's no guarantee any of us are coming back." The next 3 days passed in intense preparation. Xena trained with the rebels, learning their tactics and teaching them some of hers. She showed them pressure point techniques adapted for stormtrooper armor, how to use terrain for maximum advantage, and most importantly, how to fight as a cohesive unit rather than individual heroes. In return, they taught her about Imperial military doctrine, shipboard combat procedures, and the basics of surviving in hostile environments with advanced technology. It was a fair exchange, born from mutual respect and the recognition that they'd all need every advantage on Malachor. Kira spent the time upgrading the Broken Promises stealth systems and reinforcing the shields. "If we're running an Imperial blockade, I want every edge I can get," she explained, welding plates onto vulnerable hull sections. "This ship survived a lot of stupid decisions. I'd like to keep that streak going." Kael kept his distance mostly, but occasionally Xena would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. On the second evening, he approached as she practiced with her chakram in a secluded part of the caves. "That weapon," he said without preamble, "it defies physics. I've seen nothing like it in this galaxy. It's from my world. Different rules. The Force touches everything, every dimension, even your weapon." Kael held out his hand. "May I?" Xena hesitated, then handed him the chakram. No one else had ever held it. The weapon was deeply personal, a symbol of her identity. But something about Kael's intensity made her curious. He closed his eyes, running his fingers along the chakram's edge. "There's power here. Ancient. Not the Force, but something parallel. A different expression of the energy that binds reality together." His eyes opened. "You wield this instinctively, without understanding what you're doing. That's dangerous. It's always worked before, because you've been lucky. But on Malachor, luck runs out. The dark side will try to corrupt even this." He handed the chakram back. "Keep your mind clear. Don't let anger or desperation drive your actions. The moment you do, that weapon becomes a liability instead of an asset." "Why do you care?" Because I've seen too many good people fall to darkness. Because this mission matters, and I need everyone at their best. Kale's expression softened slightly. And because you remind me of what I used to believe in, before the galaxy taught me that belief isn't enough. What is enough? Survival. Victory. Whatever it takes to ensure the people you care about live to see tomorrow. He turned to leave, then paused. That person you're trying to get back to Gabrielle, she's what keeps you grounded, isn't she? Xena stiffened. How do you know about? Kira mentioned it. And I can see it in how you fight. Every move calculated to minimize casualties, to preserve life when possible. That's not just skill, that's someone fighting to be worthy of going home. Kale's smile was sad. Hold on to that. On Malachor, it might be the only thing that saves you. He left before Xena could respond. Dawn of the third day arrived with grey skies and a cold wind that cut through the highland caves. The team assembled at the Broken Promise, 7 rebels plus Xena and Kira. 9 people to attempt the impossible. Dane reviewed the plan one final time. We'll approach Malachor using hyperspace coordinates that bring us in beneath the blockade's sensor grid. It's risky, one miscalculation, and we slam into a planet or get detected. But it's our only shot at reaching the surface undetected. Once planetside, Hera continued, we move fast. In the temple, out of the temple, plant charges, destroy the weapon, and extract before Imperial forces converge. Total operation time, 4 hours maximum. What about the corruption? One of the younger rebels asked nervously. How do we fight something we can't see? You stay focused, Kale said. You remember why you're fighting, and if you feel the dark side pulling at you, rage, hatred, the desire for power, you tell someone immediately. Don't try to handle it alone. And if someone's completely compromised, the question hung in the air. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it. Then we neutralize them, Dane said finally. Non-lethally if possible. But the mission comes first. The weapon must be destroyed, whatever the cost. Xena caught Kira's eye across the group. The smuggler looked nervous, probably the first time Xena had seen genuine fear on her face. This was different from firefights or Imperial patrols. This was confronting something that could destroy you from the inside out. Stay close to me, Xena said quietly. Whatever happens down there, we watch each other's backs. You planning to protect me? Kira tried for her usual sardonic tone, but it came out shaky. I'm planning for both of us to survive. There's a difference. They boarded the ship, secured equipment, and strapped into crash seats as Kira fired up the engines. The Broken Promise lifted off, climbing through Lothal's atmosphere toward the star-filled void beyond. Xena stared out a viewport as planets became points of light and stars stretched into lines. She thought of Gabrielle, wondered if her partner could somehow feel across dimensions that Xena was still fighting, still surviving, still searching for a way home. Wait for me, she thought again. I'm coming back, I promise. The ship shuddered as it prepared to jump to hyperspace. Dane's voice came over the intercom. Initiating jump in 10 seconds. Next stop, Malachor. May the Force be with us all. The stars became streaks of light, and the Broken Promise vanished into hyperspace, carrying 9 souls toward a world where darkness reigned and ancient evils waited in temples built by beings who'd mastered power at the cost of their humanity. Xena checked her weapons one last time, sword sharp, chakram ready. Whatever Malachor held, she would face it the same way she'd faced everything else in her violent, complicated life, with steel in her hand and fire in her heart, and the memory of someone worth fighting for. The countdown to hell had begun. Malachor appeared through the viewport like a wound in space, a planet of red stone and black shadows, its surface scarred by massive canyons that seemed to bleed darkness into the surrounding void. Even from orbit, Xena felt something wrong about the place, a pressure against her mind, subtle but persistent, like standing too close to a fire that burned with invisible flames. Force presence is off the charts, Kale said from the cockpit, his face pale. I can feel the dark side from here. It's Hungry, hungry, one of the younger rebels asked nervously. It feeds on fear, anger, desperation. Emotions become amplified down there. You need to lock down your feelings, maintain discipline. Kale's hand moved to his lightsaber unconsciously. And whatever you do, don't touch anything that looks like it might be a Sith artifact. The corruption can transfer through objects. Kira piloted the Promise with precision, following the coordinates that would bring them in under the Imperial blockade. Xena could see the massive Star Destroyer hanging in high orbit, its triangular silhouette bristling with weapons. Smaller patrol ships moved in predictable patterns around it. They're not expecting anyone to be crazy enough to approach from this vector, Kira muttered, adjusting their trajectory. Let's prove them wrong. The ship dove toward Malakor's surface, engines running cold to minimize their sensor signature. For several tense minutes, they fell through the atmosphere, while alarms remained silent. Then they were through, skimming over red stone canyons at dangerous speeds. There, Dane said, pointing at a canyon complex ahead. That's the temple. It rose from the canyon floor like a geometric nightmare, all sharp angles and impossible architecture that seemed designed to hurt the eye. The stone was black as void, covered in markings that writhed in the periphery of vision. Around the temple, the ground was littered with the remains of ancient battles, shattered weapons, armor fragments, bones that had turned to stone over millennia. Landing zone 200 meters from the main entrance, Kira announced, bringing the Promise down in a clear area. And we're officially committed. No turning back now. They disembarked into oppressive heat that had nothing to do with Malakor's distant sun. The air tasted of ash and copper. Xena's skin crawled with the sensation of being watched by invisible eyes. Around her, the rebels checked their weapons with nervous efficiency. Stay together, Dane ordered. Standard formation, Hera on point, Kale beside her to sense force threats. Combat pairs behind. Move quickly but carefully. We're exposed out here. They advanced toward the temple entrance, a massive doorway carved with images of figures locked in eternal combat. The darkness beyond the threshold seemed absolute, resistant to their portable lights. Kale stopped at the entrance, his face twisted with concentration. The corruption's worse than I expected. I can feel it trying to get inside my head already. He looked back at the group. Last chance to turn back. No one will think less of you. No one moved. Whatever fears they carried, commitment to the mission overrode them. Then let's get this done, Dane said, and they entered. The interior was vast, a cathedral of darkness punctuated by crimson crystals that provided dim, bloody illumination. Statues lined the walls, depicting beings of terrible power, frozen in poses of conquest or agony. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into shadow, and everywhere, that pressure against the mind grew stronger. Xena felt it immediately, memories rising unbidden. The villages she'd burned, the people she'd killed in her pursuit of power, the look in Gabrielle's eyes, the first time she'd seen what Xena truly was capable of becoming. The dark side was digging through her past like a scavenger through ruins, looking for leverage. Not real, she told herself. Just memories. They don't control me anymore. But doubt whispered back. Don't they? The weapon should be in the lower chambers, Kale said, his voice strained. The archives are up those stairs. He pointed to a massive staircase carved from the black stone. We split up. Dane's team plants the charges. Xena searches the archives. We regroup here in 2 hours. Splitting up is against protocol, Hera objected. Everything about this place is against protocol, but we don't have time to do it sequentially. Dane was already organizing his demolition team. Xena, you take Kira and one other. The rest come with me. Stay on comms, report every 10 minutes. If anyone feels compromised, you say so immediately. They divided. Xena's group consisted of herself, Kira, and a young human rebel named Jace, who'd volunteered to provide tech support. The three of them climbed the massive staircase while Dane's team descended toward the temple's depths. The archives occupied a circular chamber 3 levels up, its walls lined with shelves containing holocrons, data crystals, and ancient texts preserved through dark side energy. In the chamber's center stood a pedestal holding what looked like a star map, a three-dimensional projection of the galaxy with specific points marked in pulsing red. "This is incredible," Jace breathed, already moving toward a data terminal. "This knowledge, the Empire would kill millions to access this, which is why we're destroying it," Kira reminded him. After Xena finds what she needs, Xena moved through the archives systematically, searching for any reference to dimensional travel, reality rifts, or the force techniques Soran had mentioned. Most of the texts were in languages she couldn't read, but the holocrons activated when touched, projecting information in Basic. The first three contained Sith philosophy rants about power and domination that reminded her uncomfortably of her own speeches as a warlord. She moved on. The fourth holocron showed ritual techniques for binding force users to one's will. The fifth detailed methods for extracting life energy from entire populations. "These people were monsters," Kira said, reading over her shoulder. "They didn't just want power, they wanted to break the universe itself." "Power corrupts," Xena said quietly. "I learned that the hard way." Then she found it a holocron whose activation triggered a projection of a robed figure with eyes like burning coals. The figure spoke in a language that shouldn't have been understandable but somehow was, as if the dark side itself translated. "The barriers between realities are not impenetrable. The force flows through all dimensions, connecting infinite possibilities. To traverse these barriers requires immense power or the knowledge of naturally occurring nexus points where reality grows thin." The projection shifted to show what looked like a map of hyperspace routes, but with additional markers that pulsed with strange energy. "These are the wounds in space where dimensions intersect. Most are unstable, dangerous, but three remain constant. The world between worlds on Lothal, the nexus of shadows in the unknown regions, and the rift of eternity in the galactic core." Xena memorized the locations frantically. One of these could be her way home. The holocron continued. "To access these nexus points requires either natural force sensitivity or an artifact attuned to dimensional frequencies. The Sith created such artifacts' keys that could open doors between worlds. One such key rests in the Chamber of Convergence, deep within this temple." "Chamber of Convergence," Xena repeated. "Jace, can you find that on the temple schematics?" The young rebel was hunched over the terminal, sweat dripping despite the cold. I can try, but this architecture doesn't make sense. Rooms that shouldn't connect do. Spaces that should be solid aren't. It's like the temple exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously." His voice had changed subtly, harder, colder. Xena noticed his hands were shaking. "Jace, look at me." He turned, and his eyes carried a glint of something that wasn't entirely human. "I'm fine. Just concentrating. This place is fascinating, really. All this knowledge, all this power." The Sith understood something the Jedi never did, that power isn't inherently evil. It's a tool. What matters is how you use it. "That's the corruption talking," Kira said, her hand moving to her blaster. "Xena, we need to." Jace's hand shot out, force pushing Kira backward into a wall. She hit hard and slumped down, dazed. The young rebel stood, his posture different now, predatory, confident in a way he'd never been before. "The dark side shows truth," he said, his voice layered with something ancient and terrible. "You're all fools, fighting for a lost cause. The Empire will win. It always wins. But down here, in this temple, I could learn to harness real power. I could become something more than cannon fodder for the rebellion." Xena drew her sword slowly. "Jace, listen to me. That's not you talking. The temple is using your fears, your doubts, amplifying them. You're stronger than this." "Am I?" He laughed bitterly. "I've watched friends die in every operation. I've seen the Empire crush resistance cells across the galaxy. What has fighting gotten me except nightmares and survivor's guilt? But with this power..." His hands crackled with dark energy. I could actually make a difference. By becoming the thing you're fighting against. Xena took a step forward, sword lowered in a non-threatening stance. I've walked that path. I was a warlord who conquered nations, who believed power was the only thing that mattered. It destroyed everything I touched. Everyone I cared about suffered because of it. You're lying. You're strong. I can see it in how you fight. I'm strong because I learned to fight for something beyond power. Because someone showed me that true strength comes from protecting people, not dominating them. Xena thought of Gabrielle, of her partner's unwavering belief in redemption. The dark side is offering you everything, except what you actually need. Purpose, community, the knowledge that you're part of something bigger than yourself. Jace's hands trembled, the dark energy flickering. I'm tired of being weak. Then be strong the right way. Help us complete this mission. Destroy the weapon that would kill billions. Live to fight another day, with your soul intact. Xena extended her hand. Come back from the edge. It's not too late. For a long moment, Jace stood frozen, caught between the temple's corruption and his own better nature. Then his hands dropped, the dark energy dissipating. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. I almost. Gods. I almost. But you didn't. Xena helped him up, while Kira recovered and rejoined them, rubbing her head. That's what matters. Now we get what we came for and get out of here before the corruption tries again. Jace, still shaking, returned to the terminal with new determination, as if nearly falling to darkness had strengthened his resolve to resist. Chamber of Convergence. Found it. Lower levels, near where Dane's team is planting charges. But Xena. He looked up, his young face aged by what he'd just experienced. The path there goes through something called the Trial of Shadows. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. Over the comms, Dane's voice crackled. Charges are planted, but we've got a problem. Imperial forces just entered the temple, a full squad of stormtroopers led by an Inquisitor. They must have detected our landing. We're pinned down in the weapon chamber. Can you hold them? Hera's voice tense. For a while, but we need extraction soon. The corruption's getting worse. I'm seeing things that aren't there, or maybe they are. I don't know anymore. Kale's voice joined the channel, sharp with pain. The Inquisitor is powerful. I can feel him from here. He's drawing on the temple's dark side energy to amplify his abilities. We can't fight him conventionally. Xena made a decision. I'm going for the Chamber of Convergence. Kira, Jace, get back to the ship. Prepare for emergency extraction. When I signal, you come in fast. Alone? Kira protested. That's suicide. I've faced worse odds. Xena checked her weapons. The Inquisitor will be focused on Dane's team. That gives me a window. I get the artifact, we blow the temple, everyone gets out. And if you die down there, then you leave without me. The mission matters more than one person. Xena met Kira's eyes. Tell Soren his information was good. Tell him I tried. Before Kira could argue further, Xena was moving, sprinting back down the stairs toward the lower levels, toward the Trial of Shadows, toward whatever ancient horror waited in the Chamber of Convergence. The temple's corruption pressed against her mind with renewed intensity, showing her visions of failure, of Gabrielle lost forever, of dying alone in this dark place far from home. But she pushed through. She'd faced her darkness before and chosen the light. She could do it again. The corridor ahead descended into absolute blackness. Somewhere below, an Inquisitor hunted her allies. Deeper still, an artifact that could take her home waited in a chamber designed to test those who sought its power. Xena tightened her grip on her sword and stepped into the darkness. The Trial of Shadows had begun. The Trial of Shadows was not a place but a pathway, a corridor that seemed to stretch infinitely, its walls carved with images that moved in the periphery of vision. Each step forward felt like walking through water, resistance building with every meter. The darkness here was alive, sentient, hungry for the chance to break another soul. Xena moved cautiously, every sense alert. The visions started almost immediately. She saw herself standing over Gabrielle's body, blood on her hands, that terrible moment when she'd failed to save the one person who mattered most. The memory was real. It had happened years ago, before she'd found a way to bring Gabrielle back. The guilt was old, but never fully healed. You couldn't protect her then, the darkness whispered. What makes you think you can find her now? She's probably moved on, found someone better. Someone who isn't a murderer. She wouldn't, Xena said aloud, her voice echoing strangely. She waited for me before. She'll wait again. The vision shifted. Now she saw armies at her command, thousands of warriors ready to die at her word. Power, control, the ability to reshape this galaxy according to her will. The Empire was tyrannical, yes. But what if she replaced it with something better? She'd done it before, conquered territories, and brought them prosperity through strength. You were magnificent as a conqueror, the darkness purred. Why waste your talents playing hero? Take this galaxy. Rule it. Make it safe for everyone by making it fear you. Xena's hand tightened on her sword. Because that's not safety. That's just tyranny with a different face. I learned that lesson. I won't unlearn it. The visions came faster now. Her brother, dying because she'd failed to protect him. The countless villages burned in her conquest. The look in her mother's eyes when she'd realized what her daughter had become. Every failure, every sin, every moment of weakness paraded before her in excruciating detail. And through it all, the darkness offered solutions. Power to prevent failure, strength to protect those she loved, the ability to control fate itself rather than be subject to it. It was seductive. It was logical. It was everything she'd once believed. But she'd learned better. I'm not that person anymore, Xena said. And with each word, the corridor seemed to brighten slightly. I've made peace with my past. I've accepted that I can't control everything. And I've learned that real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about choosing right, even when it costs you everything. The darkness recoiled slightly, as if surprised. Then it changed tactics. Gabrielle appeared before her, not a vision, but so real Xena could smell her partner's familiar scent, could see the warmth in those green eyes. Xena, Gabrielle said, reaching out. I've been waiting so long. Come with me. I know the way home. Xena's heart lurched. Every fiber of her being wanted to believe, to follow, to finally be reunited. But something was wrong. Gabrielle's smile was too perfect. Her eyes held no questions about where Xena had been, what she'd endured. This wasn't her partner, it was what the darkness thought she wanted. You're not real, Xena said, though the words felt like tearing out her own heart. Gabrielle would ask me about my journey. She'd want to know if I'd stayed true to myself. She wouldn't just offer easy answers. The false Gabrielle's expression twisted into rage. You would reject even her? You're more broken than I thought. No, I'm whole enough to know the difference between truth and illusion. Xena walked forward, passing through the image like smoke, and I'm strong enough to save myself before someone else can save me. That's what Gabrielle taught me. The corridor suddenly ended, opening into a circular chamber carved from crystalline black stone. In its center stood a pedestal holding what looked like a small geometric object, a dodecahedron of impossible angles that hurt to look at directly. Around the pedestal, the air shimmered with barely visible energy. The artifact. The key to the dimensional nexus points. Xena approached carefully, watching for traps. But the chamber remained still, silent except for her breathing. She reached out toward the artifact. A crimson blade ignited behind her. Xena spun, chakram already in hand, as the Inquisitor stepped from the shadows. He was tall, wearing black armor adorned with the Empire's insignia, his face hidden behind a helmet with glowing red eye slits. The lightsaber in his hand hummed with lethal energy. A warrior from another dimension, the Inquisitor said, his voice modulated through the helmet. How interesting. The dark side whispers much about you, your power, your past, your potential. He circled slowly, the lightsaber never wavering. You could be magnificent if you embraced what you truly are. The Emperor himself would welcome someone of your talents. I've heard better recruitment speeches, Xena said, her body shifting into a combat stance, usually with fewer death threats implied. Death is only threatened for those who resist. Submit, and you could have everything: power, purpose, the resources to find your way home. Continue to fight, and you'll die in this temple like so many before you. Option 3. I take that artifact and walk out of here. You go back to your empire and tell them Malakor's weapon is about to become dust. The Inquisitor laughed. Bold, foolish. Let's see if your skill matches your confidence. He attacked. The lightsaber came in fast, a horizontal slash aimed at her midsection. Xena blocked with her sword, the ancient bronze blade somehow holding against the energy weapon, sparks flying from the contact. She felt the heat, the power behind the blow, but her sword didn't melt. Another gift from her world. Apparently, the Inquisitor's eyes widened behind his helmet. Impossible. That blade should be slag. My world has its own rules. Xena pressed the attack, her sword moving in patterns perfected over decades. High slash, low thrust, a feint to the left followed by a chakram throw to the right. The Inquisitor deflected the chakram with the force, sending it careening off at a wild angle. But Xena had expected that she'd thrown it to ricochet off the chamber walls, not to hit him directly. The weapon bounced impossibly around the room, forcing the Inquisitor to divide his attention between Xena's sword and the returning chakram. He was skilled, Xena had to admit. His lightsaber moved with precision, his force abilities augmented his physical capabilities, and he fought with the confidence of someone who'd killed many opponents. But he'd never faced anyone like her. She used pressure point strikes when she got close, targeting nerve clusters that existed in most humanoid species. The Inquisitor's left arm went momentarily numb from a well-placed strike, his lightsaber wavering. She followed up with a spinning kick that would have ended the fight. He caught her leg with the force and threw her backward. Xena hit the chamber wall hard, pain flaring through her back. The Inquisitor advanced, lightsaber raised for the killing blow. Her chakram returned, striking him in the shoulder joint of his armor. He stumbled, and Xena rolled to her feet, ignoring the pain. She'd fought through worse. She'd battled gods while injured, led armies while half dead from exhaustion. Pain was just information. "You're good," the Inquisitor admitted, his voice strained. "But you're not force-sensitive. You can't win this fight. Watch me." Xena feinted left, then went right, her sword moving in a pattern designed to force him off balance. When he tried to use the force to push her away, she was already inside his guard, too close for the technique to be effective. Her elbow struck his helmet, cracking one of the eye lenses. Her follow-up strike targeted the pressure point at his wrist. The lightsaber fell from nerveless fingers. Before he could retrieve it with the force, Xena kicked it across the chamber. Then, her chakram was at his throat, the blade's edge pressed against the gap between helmet and armor. "Yield," she said. The Inquisitor froze. "You won't kill me. I can sense it. You're trying to be better than what you were. Killing an unarmed opponent would betray that. You're right. I won't kill you." Xena's expression hardened. "But I will leave you unconscious and trapped in a temple that's about to explode. Your choice: walk away now, or wake up buried under rubble." For a long moment, they remained locked in that tableau. Then the Inquisitor slowly raised his hands in surrender. "The Empire will hear about you. They'll send everything to hunt you down. Let them try." Xena removed the chakram from his throat and struck him in the temple with her sword's pommel, precise, controlled, enough to render him unconscious but not cause permanent damage. He collapsed. She retrieved the dimensional artifact from its pedestal. Feeling its strange weight in her palm, the object seemed to pulse with energy that resonated with something deep in her being, recognition across dimensional barriers. Over the comms, Dane's voice erupted in static-filled urgency. "Charges are armed. 30-minute countdown. We need extraction now." "On my way," Xena responded, already running back through the corridor. The trial of shadows didn't challenge her on the return journey, perhaps because she'd already proven herself, or perhaps because it recognized she no longer had time for games. She burst back into the main temple to find chaos. Dane's team was fighting a running battle with stormtroopers, falling back toward the entrance while laying down covering fire. Kale had his lightsaber ignited a blue blade that moved in defensive patterns, deflecting blaster bolts back at their sources. "Where's the Inquisitor?" Hera shouted over the weapon's fire. "Handled." Xena threw her chakram, taking out 3 stormtroopers in one impossibly angled throw. "Move. This whole place is coming down." They fought their way to the entrance as explosions began deep in the temple, the charges detonating in sequence, bringing down support structures. The temple shook violently, ancient stone cracking under pressures it was never designed to withstand. The broken promise screamed in from above, Kira's voice triumphant over the comms. "Need a ride?" They piled into the ship as stormtroopers continued firing. One bolt caught Dane in the shoulder. He went down with a curse. Hera and another rebel dragged him aboard while Xena and Kale covered their retreat. The boarding ramp was still rising as Kira engaged engines and lifted off. Behind them, the Sith temple collapsed in on itself. Millennia of dark side corruption finally purged in fire and destruction. The superweapon that could have ended the war in the Empire's favor became rubble and dust. In the ship's cargo hold, surrounded by exhausted rebels, Xena clutched the dimensional artifact and allowed herself a moment of hope. She had a way forward now. 3 nexus points where she could potentially open a door home. It would be dangerous, probably nearly impossible, but she'd done impossible things before. "You did it," Kira said, collapsing beside her. "You crazy, magnificent warrior. You actually did it. We all did it." Xena looked around at the team, injured, exhausted, but alive. "Thank you for trusting me, for helping me." Dane, being bandaged by the team's medic, managed a pained smile. "Thank you for not dying heroically and making us explain to Command why we brought a dimensional traveler to Malachor. The paperwork would have been murder. Even in their exhaustion, that got weak laughs." Kale approached, his lightsaber now deactivated and clipped to his belt. "The artifact you retrieved, I can feel its power from here. It's dangerous, Xena. Using it could tear you apart if you're not careful." "I'll be careful. I've come too far to fail now." Xena met his eyes. "And thank you for not falling to the darkness down there. I saw you resisting it, fighting to stay in the light. I had good examples to follow." Kale glanced at the exhausted rebels around them. "These people remind me why I survived the purge. Not for revenge, for hope that something better is possible." The broken promise jumped to hyperspace, leaving Malachor behind as Imperial reinforcements arrived too late to stop them. In the swirling tunnel of faster-than-light travel, Xena finally allowed herself to relax. One step closer to home, one step closer to Gabrielle, but also one more connection formed in this strange galaxy. One more reminder that heroism existed everywhere, in every dimension, carried by people willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. She would find her way home. But she would remember this: the rebels who fought impossible odds, the smuggler who risked everything for friendship, the former Jedi who walked the edge between light and dark without falling. This galaxy far, far away had given her a gift, proof that redemption was possible anywhere, that fighting for others mattered, that Gabrielle's faith in her was justified. Soon, she would go home, but she would carry these lessons with her, these people in her memory, this impossible adventure, as evidence that heroism transcended dimensions. The warrior princess smiled a real smile, full of hope and determination, and began planning her next move toward the nexus points that would finally reunite her with the woman she loved. The journey home would not be easy. The nexus points were scattered across a galaxy at war, each one guarded by dangers that made Malachor seem tame in comparison. But Xena had faced impossible odds before, and emerged victorious through skill, determination, and the memory of someone worth fighting for. The rebellion offered to help her reach the world between worlds on Lothal. It was closest, most accessible, though still incredibly dangerous. In exchange, she would train their soldiers, share her tactical knowledge, help them in their fight against the Empire. It was a fair deal, one she accepted without hesitation. Kira Thrace became more than a smuggler. She became a friend, a sister in arms, someone who understood what it meant to survive through wit and courage. They would share many adventures in the weeks that followed, battles that would forge a bond across dimensions. Kael Vorin found renewed purpose, using his knowledge of the Force to help Xena understand the dimensional artifact. Together, they studied the ancient Sith technology, learning its secrets without succumbing to its corruption. And through it all, Xena carried Gabrielle with her, in memory, in purpose, in the constant drive to be worthy of the love that had redeemed her from darkness. Every fight, every decision, every moment of compassion, shown in a galaxy that often forgot mercy, all of it was for her partner waiting in another world. When the day finally came that Xena stood before the world between worlds, artifact in hand and allies at her back, she looked at the swirling portal that would take her home and smiled. She'd left her mark on this galaxy, trained rebels, destroyed a superweapon, proven that heroes could come from anywhere, even other dimensions. The Star Wars galaxy would remember the warrior princess who fell from the sky, fought impossible battles, and refused to compromise her principles even when facing corruption that had broken stronger souls. Songs would be sung, legends would grow, and somewhere in the Outer Rim, settlers would tell their children about the woman with the impossible throwing weapon who taught them to stand against tyranny. But Xena's story didn't end in this galaxy far, far away. It continued in her own world, reunited with Gabrielle, carrying forward the lessons learned and the friendships forged. She had been tested by the dark side and emerged stronger. She had faced an empire and survived. She had proven, once again, that redemption was real and heroism transcended all barriers, even the spaces between realities. The warrior princess stepped through the portal, leaving the Star Wars galaxy behind but never forgetting it. And in the worlds she touched, both her own and the one she visited, her legend lived on proof that one person with courage, skill, and determination could change the fate of galaxies.